So we're going to be doing our Zorn palette apple. So we're going to paint a green apple, but we're not going to be using any green paint. So this is kind of a little bit of a lesson in color theory or color relativity when you're looking at colors compared to other colors, not just like a color on its own. So what we're going to need, my paints probably look a little different than yours, but that's okay. This is just what I have at home. We're going to need red, yellow, and then black and white. I'm just going to squirt mine out onto this little piece of parchment paper because I don't have, oh boy, if I can get these open, I haven't opened these in a while, because I am kind of lazy and I don't want to clean off my palette. So I'm just going to use this piece of parchment paper, and then when I'm done, I'm just going to toss it there. But I got all my paint lids loosened up, so I'm just going to squirt out a little bit of each of these colors. So I've got black and white. And then our red. This says primary magenta. Whatever you have, one that looks kind of red. And our yellow. And I'm doing this with acrylic paint, but you can do this with any kind of paint. So if you have oil at home that you want to work with, that's awesome. If you want to do it with watercolor, that works too. This is just what I had, and I kind of like acrylic. Okay, I'm going to find a brush over here. And you don't really need any specific brush for this. I mean, we're just doing some practice. I think I'll just use this one here. A little bit of a stiffer bristle brush. Okay, so to make green, how are we going to make green with these colors? Because if you think about color mixing, how do we make green? We usually make it with yellow and blue. Well, I'm not using blue, I'm using this limited palette, and I'm not going to use blue. So how am I going to make green? If you think back to when we did our value scales, and we did some different like color mixing, you probably noticed when you mixed your shades of yellow, so you're adding black paint to yellow, it kind of got this like dingy green color. So that's what we're going to actually do to make our green. We're going to be using yellow and black. So I'm going to start out, I'm just going to scoop up a little bit of this yellow, and I'm going to be using my paintbrush to mix my colors. I know I normally say, hey, don't use your paintbrush to mix your colors. The only reasoning behind that is sometimes you don't want to load up your brush with a bunch of paint, and so if you're mixing your paint with your brush is going to be totally saturated with paint. Another reason why you usually don't want to do that is because when you're mixing it with that, the paint can often like really easily get up into like this upper part of these bristles and even up into this metal piece on your paintbrush, and that can kind of cause your bristles to like stick out funny and not hold their shape very nice. So if you mix your paint with your paintbrush, I just advise that you try to keep the paint in the lower half of the bristles. Try not to get it like up in here. And it's not a big deal. Lots of people like to mix with their paintbrush. So I've got mostly yellow, and I'm going to use like the tiniest little bit of black to mix in there, and we'll see what happens. So you're not going to be able to get like some bright lime green color, like some bright like green sour apple color, but you still will be able to achieve a green. So maybe I'll add a tiny bit more black to it too. I think that looks all right. It's a good start. So I think this will be kind of like my base color. I'll have to add a little bit maybe white or a little more yellow in areas for a highlight on my apple, and maybe a touch more of the black for like the darker parts of my apple. I haven't sketched anything out. This is just practice exercise. You don't even have to use a reference photo if you don't want. Just think about what does an apple look like and kind of go for it. Not a big deal because it's just practice. So let's see, I'm just gonna start dropping some paint in here. gonna start to make a little bit of an apple shape. I don't know, apples are all kinds of shapes. Sometimes they're a little more round, sometimes they're a little taller, sometimes they're a little wider. Sometimes they're kind of heart-shaped in a way. So it doesn't matter, however you want to make your apple. And then maybe I'll add in a little bit more. I'm using up my paint pretty quick here. I'm gonna have to mix up some more of this color. Add a little bit more black as I kind of come down over here and kind of start to make a shadow over here. Let's see, I want the bottom of my apple kind of gonna look like that. Mine's a little bit wider at the top, I'd say. I'm gonna mix a little bit more of this color again. Got a little too much black on my brush. That's okay. Just gonna mix this together. And this looks a little bit darker than that first color of green I mixed, but that's okay. And then I'll come down here. I think this is going to be my side with my shadow on it. So this will be kind of the darker side. My light source I think I'm going to have coming from this way. So it's going to be a light shining down, the apple's going to be nice and bright here, and then we'll have our shadow over on this side. So I'll use this darker color over there. Doesn't have to be perfect, it's just practice. Got my darker side on here. And maybe I'll come in with a little bit more yellow. Kind of get a little bit of this paint out of my brush. I'm just going to wipe it. A little bit brighter over here. I might come in with some white over there. I'll kind of just blend it in. Another thing, it's just practice. It's totally up to you how you want to mix your colors. Some people, when they're painting, they like that more stylized, like brush stroke look. Some people like the brush strokes in their work. Some people like things to be smooth. So however you want to do it is absolutely okay. Whatever you like to do. Just give it a try, go for it. Darker side on my apple. I'm going to snag a little bit of this white. And do a little bit of a highlight on my apple on this side, I think. Maybe even a little more. Maybe my light's kind of coming from above on the side, so maybe this spot's really highlighted, really shining. Maybe I'll add a little bit more of just the yellow in there to get a nice highlight. And then I'll come back in with a little bit more of this green color. Kind of mix in between here. Maybe I need to brighten up this side of my apple just a little bit. Maybe I'll mix some white right into this green. I don't think it should be too dark on the top there, so maybe lighten that up a little bit. Wipe off some of that excess paint, and then see if I can still mix these together if it didn't get too dry on me. So that I have a nice gradient value going from that lighter color down to the darker. Whoops, kind of went out of my apple shape there, so it's going to get a little bit rounder on the bottom. That's okay though. And maybe I'll snag a little bit of the black again. Not too much. And we'll kind of add a little more shadow in here. And maybe a little bit more shadow around the bottom. I'm going to rinse out my brush a little bit. And wipe it off. And then I think I'm going to kind of blend this area together a little bit better. I think I should come in with a little more yellow in my highlight area. And I might come in with some more around the top too. Highlight that top a little bit more. Maybe my apple kind of dips down a little bit, right over here. And maybe you can see a little bit of that divot in the top part of your apple where the stem comes out. So maybe I'll have a little bit of this shadow area right up in here. Alrighty, I think I'm going to add a little bit more white to my highlight side. Oops. Maybe it's really got a nice shine on it and it's kind of reflecting that light, so maybe I won't really blend that white in totally. Maybe I'll just lighten this up a little right around there. And I think I'll add a stem in, and I'm going to use like a little bit of black and then some red for my kind of brown stem color. Maybe I'll even add a little bit of yellow into this. There we go. I can just kind of pop a little stem in. Something like that. And you could add a little leaf if you wanted. And then let's add a little bit more detail. So let's see, let's give this apple a home. So he could be sitting on a counter. So maybe I'm gonna rinse this out and I'm gonna use gray. So I'm gonna mix together some black and white. Not too much black. Maybe I'll even throw a little bit of this red into it, because that's definitely gonna make that green pop out more if I put like a red color around it, because red and green are those complementary colors. They really contrast each other. So I think that red is gonna really help with this color relativity, make that apple look even more green. Maybe I'll add a little more black. Okay, so we'll give them a home, sitting on a counter. Whoops. Maybe I'll add a little bit more white in here. And maybe I'll even just mix it on my paper to lighten up this counter. Alrighty, so we kind of got a place for it to sit there. Now I think I'll add in a little bit of background behind it. Just gonna wipe some of this extra paint off my brush. Okay, then I'll come in behind it. This time maybe I'll use even more red behind it. We'll use a good deal of red. And maybe we'll make the background a little bit darker. A little bit of white, even more red. I've really made a mess of my brush. That's okay though. It's an old brush. I think I want even more red in it. I'm gonna grab a little bit more out. I can't get the lid on. There we go. And we'll mix that in. I really like working on parchment paper or plastic wrap because then you don't have to worry about cleaning up your mess. Because I don't like to clean up after myself. So that's why I'm doing the parchment paper, kind of lazy, but it's easy too. Another thing, so like with the plastic wrap, I usually don't just work on plain plastic wrap. Sometimes I'll tape plastic wrap down to the table so that stays in place. Sometimes I will plastic wrap around a paint palette and then mix my paint on top of the plastic, and then when I'm done, I can just pull that plastic wrap off my paint palette and throw it away. So that's kind of another easy way to do things. Okay, so you can see I'm laying down this color right next to it. And I sure think that this kind of darker, I don't know, maybe you would say maroon or like burgundy color, I think it's really helping that green apple look even more green. It's really contrasting the apple. I think I should have mixed a little bit more paint. That's okay though. I can mix up some more of this color. I'm gonna grab a little bit of water. That's the only kind of downfall, in my opinion, of acrylic, is how quick it can dry. Sometimes it's a really good thing, sometimes it kind of stinks. Because you'll be working on something and then you'll try to come back to it and work it some more, and your paint has already dried, and then you can't really work it. You just gotta paint right over it. I'm gonna straighten this out a little bit. Maybe I'll do the same thing over here. I'll come in with a little more water. And I like to turn my painting around every which way when I'm painting. I can't leave it just like straight up and down. I think it's easier to turn it this way, that way, whichever way works for you. I think I might end up kind of losing my stem in this background here. It's going to be kind of not as easy to see, so I might have to go back and add a little bit of highlight to my stem, maybe add a little bit of white so that it sticks out a little bit more and doesn't kind of just fade right in and disappear in the background. Okay, I'll rinse up my brush. And I'll wipe it off. And I'm going to grab a tiny bit of white so I can highlight my stem a little bit. This brush is kind of thick. I kind of want to press it down, kind of shape it before I go in and try to highlight that stem so that it's not like covering my whole stem in white. I just want to get like one little side on there, one little edge of it. Maybe I'll even actually grab a different brush that's a little bit skinnier. Use this little brush here. A little bit of white paint. And I'll give our stem a little bit of a highlight. Whoops, kind of covered the whole thing. That's okay. I'll come in with a little bit more brown. Tiny bit of red, tiny bit of yellow, a little bit of the black, maybe a touch of white. I think color mixing is so fun. That's always my favorite part, is just mixing up the colors. Mix it up until you have something that looks right to you, until you like what you got. I kind of like that a little bit lighter brown. I'll come in with that. That lighter brown will help it stick out more from the background too. And then maybe I can add a little bit more black. And then we can give it more of a shadow on one side. And I almost forgot, we need to give it one more thing before we finish everything up. So I mixed up a gray color like I did down here, except for I want it to be a little darker. So this was just black, white, definitely a lot more white, and a little bit of red in it. But now I'm going to mix it up with maybe a little bit more black. So I have a darker color than that countertop or background or whatever that is. And I'm going to give my apple a little bit of a shadow. So some kind of shadow down and around this apple. And since my light source is coming from up here, that means I'm going to have the shadow that's over here. So just try to think about the angle of the apple. It doesn't have to be perfect. Like I said, this is just practice. And we're not using a reference photo. So it's kind of like hard to say exactly where that shadow would be. That's okay, just kind of make it up. But you should still have some kind of a shadow in there. Maybe it comes out this way a little bit more. And there's my kind of shadow. It's a little bit dark. I could have maybe made it a little bit lighter, kind of fading it out around the edges. But it's nothing fancy. There we go. There's my basic little apple here. It's not about proportions or making it look super realistic. I just want you to try painting with this limited palette. So we're painting something that's green, but we're not using green paint. So go ahead and give it a try and then upload your photo on Canvas.